We started this channel 5 years ago in July of 2020. It took some time to start making videos regularly, but this anniversary is a good opportunity to talk about 5 areas where I've changed my mind or evolved my thinking on urbanism. Let me know what you think. Number 1. Optimal density. This channel exists because of a fascination with Montreal, especially its bike infrastructure and medium-density housing. Montreal's walk-up apartments, called multiplexes or plexes, offer a cool mix of higher and lower density features, and some of our earliest videos were filled with excitement explaining them. But over time, I became uncomfortable with how many people saw this as a universal optimal density and thought it was a travesty to build anything taller. We never explicitly endorsed that, but our talk of missing middle or human-scale housing contributed. People started quoting our videos to argue against modest height increases in Montreal. Over time, I realized that urban NIMBYism in Montreal, Brooklyn, London, wherever is just as bad as the suburban variant. In some ways worse because it's excluding people from walkable, transit-oriented neighborhoods near jobs. Exactly the kind of place I'd like more people to live. They even use many of the same arguments about neighborhood character, shadows, or parking. I considered remaking some of these old Montreal housing videos to have better production values, but decided not to. To be clear, I still like walk-up apartments, and I appreciate that Montreal isn't as obsessed with single-family homes as many other cities. But I don't think we city dwellers can criticize suburban NIMBYs for fighting change while saying, "But you don't understand, my neighborhood is perfect, special, optimal, just the way it is." There is no optimal density. Density is how much housing you get from a certain amount of land, and that has to depend on the availability of land and the demand for housing, including people's preferences about where to live, which usually means high densities near jobs and transit. Denying that just means pushing people out to the suburbs to be more dependent on cars. Number 2. North America. Like other people in the urbanist space, I used to lump together Canada and the United States to talk about North American suburbs or design. That's not usually intended to include Mexico, where neighborhoods tend to be more compact and mixed use by default. But traveling more in the US and working with data, density, transit ridership, traffic safety, has made me more and more aware of the differences between Canada and the US. One wake-up call was visiting Miami, which has a staggering 8 times more traffic deaths per capita than Toronto. Here's the traffic fatality rate for American states in blue, Canadian provinces in red, and Australian states in gold, but just the ones over 2 million people for space reasons. Outside of New York and Massachusetts, the US has higher traffic fatalities across the board. People say Alberta is like Texas, but on this it's actually more like Massachusetts. What explains this difference? It's how much people drive, the size of cars, transit use, whether pedestrian infrastructure is at least passable, norms and enforcement around drunk driving, and probably many other things. To be honest, I don't fully understand why the difference is so big. This is just one example, but the US is an outlier on so many things, not just relative to Europe, but even compared to other large, suburban, car-centric countries like Canada and Australia. Of course, the US is a big place with a lot of internal variation. If the Northeast Corridor was a country, it would be much more in line with other places. None of this means it's always wrong to group together Canada and the US, for example when talking about policies we share like single-family zoning. It's just that I've become more and more aware of the differences too over the past 5 years. There's even a book on it from back in 1986. Maybe worth a future video. Number 3. Sprawl. I really prefer infill development near jobs and transit, but I've grown more open to suburban expansion. You can only spend so many years pushing for density in established areas before you realize that it's not happening at the scale we need in most cities. People say they don't like sprawl or hands off the greenbelt, but then they don't accept policies that would make that possible. If you're precious about heights here, and people fight change here just as strongly, that means building here, or exporting your housing crisis to another city. I won't give up arguing for more density in desirable central neighborhoods, but I have a hard time denouncing suburban expansion because of the political reality that makes it necessary. More and more, I like to think about how we can build better suburbs. It was informative visiting Dutch suburbs and seeing that they had better bike infrastructure than the central cities, although usually worse transit. I wish our new suburbs could copy their quaint residential streets and better connectivity for walking and cycling than for driving. Some people are overly optimistic as if we're going to rebuild Paris or another walkable paradise on the edge of a North American city. That's hard. It's not what suburban homebuyers expect, what suburban developers know how to build, or what suburban zoning rules typically allow. Building at the edge of the transit network almost inherently means that people will own more cars and drive more than if they live near the center of the transit network. But we can and should try to make new suburbs marginally less car-dependent. Number 4. Culture. Early on, talking about concepts like induced traffic, I took a very build it and they will come attitude. If you provide better bike infrastructure or transit service, more people will bike or take transit. I still think this is true, but more and more I believe in the power of culture and habit. Your transport choices are also determined by what you know and what people around you do. People in cycling cities sometimes say, "We don't have a cycling culture, it's just a practical choice for many trips." But that choice rests not just on infrastructure, but also culture and experience. Owning a bike, knowing how to ride it, being familiar with basic maintenance, route selection, and parking, and cycling just being considered a normal way to get around. That's cycling culture. If you don't have those things, you probably won't bike, even if there's a convenient route. This is why I don't love when people make a sharp distinction between utility and recreational cyclists. Just owning a bike, even if you only use it for exercise right now, puts you in a much better position to bike for transportation if the opportunity comes up. The choice to ride transit is also based on culture and experience. Knowing how to pay, how to choose the right bus, when to get off, and whether taking transit is considered a normal thing where you live or just for people who can't afford a car. So getting people to bike or take transit isn't just about infrastructure and service. There's also a wildcard of culture, experience, and expectations, which can be changed but more slowly and unpredictably. Those things are harder to see and analyze than infrastructure or timetables. Driving also depends on culture and experience. Getting a license takes time and buying a car is expensive. Then you have to learn to pump gas, park, and understand all the signs. But when it's something that everyone around you does, you don't think of it as being such an investment. Number 5. Jobs. Over the past few years, I've come to think about jobs just as much as housing. Economic opportunity is one of the biggest reasons people live in cities, and how many jobs you can reach within a reasonable commute is a pretty big predictor of your upward mobility. If we want access to jobs and a reasonable chance of people taking transit, we need transit to be fast and we need jobs to be in transit-accessible locations like downtown. That doesn't sound controversial, but many see transit as neighborhood beautification as much as transport. For example, preferring slower but nicer-looking trams instead of elevated metros, even for cross-city routes where speed really matters. Lots of people also dislike the idea of centralizing too many jobs downtown, but that's the most accessible place for them. Cities with strong downtowns like Calgary punch above their weight in transit ridership. That's not to say it's impossible to take transit to a suburban job, especially if it's near a transit hub, or that all jobs can be downtown. But we know empirically that more jobs downtown typically equals higher ridership. There, 5 important areas where my mind has changed or evolved since starting this channel. I've become much more uncomfortable with the idea of an optimal density. I've become much more conscious of differences between the US and Canada on things like transit and traffic safety. I've become more open to suburban expansion given the unfortunate problem of central city NIMBYism. I believe more in habits and culture as important in people's transportation choices. And I now think a lot more about jobs, access to them, and their location instead of just housing. On the other hand, I still believe, just as strongly as 5 years ago, that places are better when they're walkable, bike-friendly, and transit-oriented, and that abundant and affordable housing should be our policy goal rather than exclusivity and stagnation. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.